There was no attempt on my part to get to know the staff, except for the commanding officers. Furthermore, we weren't housed in a way where people would meet with each other. You just occupied certain of the buildings that were once occupied by the Nazi command. It was rare that I ate with them. We had a dining facility in the basement of the headquarters building, but 9 times out of 10 I wasn't around. I was out. Furthermore, everything was hectic. Thirdly, I was not interested in their work, per se. My interest was directly with the people on a different level. I wasn't involved in their health in the sense of sharing in any way. I was involved with the dead, for example. I had to bury the dead. They weren't involved in the dead. Once they died, we saw none of the medical staff there, and so this was my responsibility of trying to get the people to know them, what their problems were, and to begin to work with them. They were not involved in this unless they had established a relationship with one or the other, and so we were on different wavelengths. I was interested in the stock rooms of Dachau, for example. I was interested in moving people. I was interested in getting the rules changed. I was disturbed by the fact they were behind barbed wire. All my concerns were of such nature that they differed from those of the people who were there for a specific period of time. And I had practically no contact, except that if we were to restructure it, I'm sure that we'd say, fine, here was a member of this chap that came in, and there was no reason for them to be interested in me, because for them I could have been just another chaplain. They didn't have any tremendous respect for chaplains in the sense of their being effective instruments. I wasn't going to be a savior of any kind. I was just another guy that came in. And they had a chaplain there, as I indicated to you, which they call Looting Joe or something, that they had no respect for. So there was no reason on their part to get to know me. I was not interested in their work directly, although I appreciate it because they had done a heroic job. There's no question. I stood in awe of everything they did. And I was a little bit of a lost soul at the beginning, so there was no reason for any type of recognition or remembrance.
That's my feeling. I just wanted to get it for the record. With regard to changing the rules,
yes.
Can we be a little more specific about that aspect?
Well, here in the, for example, in the first Sherit Plato volume, and here again, incidentally, this one is the volume 1, and this was dedicated to Browdy, Smith, and Otto, even though Smith doesn't remember me. But I dedicated...
Also to Browdy?
Yes, Browdy. They were the 3 that went together. See, Browdy and Smith were very close.
That's Irving J. Smith,
Irving
Max
Smith,
Browdy.
And Michael Browdy, Max Browdy, and this woman, Otto, Ethel Otto. So, and I actually appreciated their work because they were doing a good job. I printed the following items. No Jew need return to his native land. Now, when I printed these items, I didn't ask anybody whether to print them. I didn't discuss them with anybody. These were convictions of mine that I felt were to become the rules by which we were going to operate.
Now, what the date?
The date, see if I put a date on this book. This is 1945, of course. And see if I, this is 26th of June, 45. Now, if you bear in mind that this was printed on the 26th, and it took quite some time before we had collected the material and gotten the printers and so forth, so we're talking about at least the month of June. By that time, I had established certain rules by which I was going to operate, and one of them was that no Jew need return to his native land. That was the first one because the army was trying to repatriate the people.
Now, even before anyone else.
That's right.
This was your established...
That's right. This was, and this became the battleground later on. And why did I do this? Because people were fearful. I was responding to the fears and concerns of the people. And furthermore, I had an image in my own mind that we move west or we move south. Mm-hmm. We're not moving east. And I was firmly convinced. In fact, there was an incident that occurred when I came back to the United States and met with the Lithuanian Jewish community representatives, and I explained to them that the Jews are not going back to Lithuania, and they were terribly disappointed, and looked at me and said, "You mean to tell me there will not be another Kovna?" And I said, "No, you forget about Kovna. That's over now." And they persisted. And finally, I looked at them and I said, "Well, why don't you go back to Kovna?" You know, they still were under the impression that the great Kovna, the great Lithuanian community, will continue to exist. And I had convinced myself, in terms of the whole structure of what had happened, that the movement had to be in a different direction. And since the army was making every attempt to repatriate, and it was going full blast and doing everything possible to push the people, to deceive them and to bribe them any way possible, because all the army wanted to do was to get them back. This was the solution to the DP problem. And so I established rule number 1. No Jew need return to his native land. That's it. And I put it in print so that the people could see it, and they could always refer to it and say, "Here, we have our rights." So I was setting up the rights for the people. And then, of course, I started the other things of those that do want to return. After all, there were those that wanted to return. And this became the beginning of the policies that would be established for the people.
But you established it a long time before that.
Oh yes, it was established even right at the beginning. It was put in print.
Okay, was there anything else about that you wanted to
All the others were detailed items in terms of the next item that I felt was important was to set up the community, to establish who's in the community by camp and people.
Now, was this, in some places, the communities themselves had the impetus and the initiative to, almost from the very beginning, establish themselves?
That's true. In fact, I read, I got a book the other day, The Witness, called...
Witness to the Truth.
Yes, and there he tells the story of Bamberg, I think, in that particular area. And he gives you the story of how they came there, and they did what we basically did on a different level.
Yeah, well, there's a perfect example. There is where individuals themselves...
Yes.
Whereas, from what I understand, in your area of Bavaria, you had to be the one to do this. Is that correct?
Well, you have two different situations. First of all, they came at a different time. They came in small numbers, and you happen to have a few individuals there who were able to make their representations before the government. You had a kind of a response which enabled them to find places and to integrate themselves, and then later to bring other people in. Here you're dealing with masses. You have the camps. You have Dachau, the Kaufring camps, you see. Later on, you have the movement of peoples, and they're going to move to centers rather than to communities, because they're looking for something. And so Munich becomes the magnet for them, because they know that in Munich there's something going on, there are people there. And so you have an entirely different situation where the people were not moving in that direction, or were not able, because army moved in very quickly when you're dealing with masses and said, "Here are the camps," and locked them up. And then you had Dachau as the center, which was locked up. However, later on, there was a similar movement in Munich when the Munich Committee was established. And the Munich Committee was established as an independent committee of the Central Committee. It was like Washington, D.C. We had our federal government, and then we had the local government. And the local government took it upon itself to establish certain relationships with the city representatives, the Munich representative, independent of the Central Committee. And they carried out all kinds of...
Now, when did the Munich Committee start?
The Munich Committee started, again, we'd have to start guessing. I'm sure there's certain literature on this, but it would be, I don't know, in the winter of 45. We got them a building, and then I got this center building, which became a synagogue and a mikveh in it, and a social room, music, and so forth, And they also used the basement to store cigarettes. The black marketeers used the basement for their cigarettes. And then they worked with the city representatives, and there were a number of scandals that were publicized at the time. And the man that represented the DP situation within the Munich government committed suicide.
Who was that?
Name will come to me, but at the moment I can't recall. In terms of a scandal that occurred. The people generally who were in charge of the committee were toughies. They were shrewd men, and they were in for everything they could get for themselves.
And that's why they broke away from the Central Committee?
No, the Central Committee, first of all, was not structured as a community operation. It was structured as a total operation. Although the Central Committee maintained the larger program, the hospital program, for example, was maintained. The supply program was maintained by the Central Committee. All people working for the Central Committee were maintained under Central Committee. But by this time, you had many people who took up residence in Munich, and they had their problems. When there was a major problem, for example, we would get, I remember, an elderly woman coming to me and telling me that she had returned. She had been hidden during the Hitler period and came back to this house and claimed a room and got it because that was her previous dwelling. And
did you not play with that over there? It might.
She had been thrown down the steps by the people in the house, and she was completely bruised. Well, this became a problem, and this wasn't something that the local committee could handle, but this was the beginning of a police department. And so I then gathered together some of my strong-arm men, and I showed them the woman, and I said, now I want you to take care of this. And we began now a kind of a protection department. And so we had a kind of an informal police department, which later created a problem also, because later on we had a member that came into the Central Committee, a Russian, I'll think of his name, and he came in with the commissar concept. And he now wanted to formalize the police department and control it. And we became suspicious that if he were to start a police department and control it, then he would control the committee also. And so there was a battle there. In fact, we'd gotten another building, and he wanted the building for his police department. We were successful in keeping him from accomplishing this, though he was constantly attempting within the committee of structuring the whole committee in terms of a commissar authority. So these were some of the programs that we continued to maintain. But the people felt they were entitled to certain rations in the city, which was a problem, to get ration coupons in the city of Munich. We weren't out to affect this kind of a program, and people were constantly coming in. They had their problems, and so you did have the development of this type of programs as you had in other places. Wherever Jews settled in a city proper, it was necessary for them to structure their lives in some way so that they could affect responses from the city administration.
Fine. Now, anything else about the rules? Any other rules that we're talking about here?
Oh, we had, this was the one rule. The other was that that the people had right of movement.
Which was against the army.
That's right, they had right of movement. 3, they had right for identification, which we started to create identification.
Identification, could we be a little more specific?
Well, a DP was not identifiable. There were numbers, masses. No individual had the right to identify himself by name and say, I am so-and-so. I am a Pole, or I am this, or I am that. I am a DP. I was brought here against my will. I have certain rights. I am not one of the defeated. I'm not a civilian in that sense, because the army only knew the victory and the defeated. And so these were some of the rules that we had to establish, and these were important. Later on, they had to be fought out on an official level. Hungarian, let's say, Hungary was was an enemy of the United States during the war. Therefore, all Hungarians were defeated and therefore had to be treated as defeated people. Now, if you were a DP and you were Hungarian, the army paid no attention to this. In fact, shortly after the war ended, and the army used the civilian population to push aside the rubble in many of the streets of the cities, DPs, Hungarian DPs were used. Jews had to work at this because, as far as army was concerned, they were Hungarians. They hadn't come to the point where they'd recognize the differences. There was no identity. And so these were part of these rules, the systems that we had to set up.
What did these rules mean to the people?
Well, it gave them the feeling that, first of all, that they were going to be protected in their rights. This was very important. And they couldn't be threatened. They had something to turn to.
But you were the only force protecting them.
Yes, so we put it in print. In other words, the printed word became, and they knew it, and the word got around because this was the main issue. After all, the people expressed their anxieties. And if we were able to respond to those anxieties in one form or another, or the chaplain said, of course, they didn't know what a chaplain was. The word chaplain didn't mean anything. They knew that I was there. I was an authority figure. You see.
Were there times when your rules conflicted with the Army rules?
Always.
And how did you deal with that? I mean, specific instances.
Well, we just said this is the position that we're going to take, and we're going to fight for it.
Would you remember any incidents?
Well, when people were imprisoned because of curfew rules, I would go to the jails and argue the point and get them out. I insisted they be permitted to move in and out of camps. We arranged for riots and strikes and things of that sort to push a point in order to make known our particular point of view as far as Army was concerned. Step by step, we tried to affect our thinking in terms of what we thought the Army should recognize as the rights of the people. And eventually, each one of these points was considered, and each was eventually granted.
Do you think it was an important result of these activities that the Army did accept them?
Well, the Army may have come around to it maybe months later. I don't know. From my point of view, I don't see how they could have escaped establishing these rules. After all, they were logical, they were necessary, and they were the rights of the people. They weren't giving them anything.
Well, what I'm asking is, do you think that your activity had any direct results?
Well, yes, because we fought it. And finally, when the advisors came, they came to see me. I said, these are the problems. This is what you have to fight for. The directive we got from Eisenhower eventually, I think August 22nd, was as a result of a big battle that we carried on up to that period of time.
Mm-hmm. You don't remember specifically what may have led to that?
There were just incidents after incidents. We battled the matter of the barbed wire and the guards. We battled the question of identification. Wherever we could, in whatever way, we would break out of the camps. We would have them march to Munich. The MPs would become aware of it. They'd block the roads, and then people would come and raise the question. We called in the newspaper people to tell them that this was going to happen. You spoke to Leo Schroll, and that was an established procedure. In other words, we knew that Leo was going to be thrown out after we'd make an issue. And we had agreed, worked this out. In other words, Leo... Yes, Leo came to me, because at that point Leo recognized. You see, Cook Glassgold, who was there, took him a long time to become aware of what really was going on. But Leo knew, and at this point Leo wanted to force the issue. And he came to me, and he knew that if he did it on his own, he couldn't get any publicity on it. And so we made the deal, and it was agreed. And we recognized that, okay, Leo, if you want to proceed, we'll go ahead, but you'll be sacrificed. And eventually he was.
Now, was Rifkin involved in
no.
this? No.
Later on, they're all involved. Once we made the issue, then everybody came into the picture.
No, I mean once it came to a head.
Yes.
Then Rifkin said that Sroll was wrong in what he was saying.
Right. Mm-hmm. Rifkin was always, any of his reports, was always trying to water down what we were saying.
And he also got into difficulty with David Marcus.
Who did?
with Rifkin.
Well, this I don't know about.
Well, because Marcus and Stroll had the same attitude that Jews were being against their will, being in the camps,
Yes.
and they weren't being given enough food, etc. And it was brought to a head. But you're not seen in that picture there.
Well, I don't know the Marcus business. Marcus came and went. The Sorol incident was managed, and I managed it. And I think Leo could give you the picture there.
Well, I went to your side also.
Yes, no. This is he agreed. He came to see me, and we felt fine, good. We'll run it. And I arranged for all the publicity, get the people down, press, and so forth. And this was it.
And this was your way of bringing it to...
That's right. We did it every conceivable way, whether we brought it in the press, whether we had a strike or a riot or whatever way that suggested that we might affect the attention of the military, or by going and arguing with individuals. Just as I told the people from the story of the camp where they were going to be moved, the 1,200 Jews, and I told them not to go. The Fryman camp.
Mm-hmm. When was this, the Fryman?
This was way early, and in fact we have a report here on the dissolution of the Fryman camp. This is Munich Fryman, where this was part of the repatriation program. And see, Fryman is listed in volume 1 of Sherita Pleta, and then shortly thereafter I report that Fryman no longer exists, and the people are in Munich. This was part of the objection to the Army taking the position that they're going to return the people, and I was not going to permit them to return if they didn't want to return. Now, for example, in Volume 3 we write, Camp Munich, Fryman, listed in Volume 1, has ceased to be a DP camp. Its former inhabitant may be found in Landsberg, Feldafing, and Munich. And that came as a result of that incident.
Yeah, but let's be specific about what was that incident?
The Army wanted to move the people,
Right.
ordered them to be moved. They came to see me. I told them not to move. Then I had a fight with the Army over it. And the Army insisted. So we said, fine, go ahead and move them. So we took the 1,200 out of the camp.
Where would you put them?
Feldafing, Landsberg, and Munich. The Munich people were the people who started to work with me in the city of Munich.
And what was the result of that? What did the Army do?
Well, the Army, I was called in, and we had quite a fight over it, and there was quite shouting, and this is when I got to know Colonel Richmond. So what was the result? Richmond became a friend of mine and helped me in many instances after that. The officer who was in charge of repatriation, I forget his name, he was incensed, and the commanding officer was incensed, but there was nothing they could do, because when I left, they didn't know that there wouldn't be 1,200 people there the following day when they sent the trucks in. And after they did that, there was nothing they could do about it. It would be embarrassing for them then to call me in and ask me where are the 1,200 people. I'd indicated to them that there will be no movement of the people. Furthermore, my grounds were very sound. I wasn't just being capricious. I explained to them as best I could what was involved here. And the point that I was trying to make is that you can't keep pushing these people around, because psychologically they need a point of reference. They're looking for people. They're looking for family. They have to have an address. And until they have that address, at least a stopping point for a moment, they're lost, and you can't continue this situation with them. And this, again, reflecting back upon the committee couldn't do anything about this. Either I would fight the battle, or there'd be no battle fought, unless somebody else came in to fight it.
And there was nobody.
There was nobody at this time.
Here's another. Do you have wait, let's. Okay.
I remember this just generally. I remember going to Freilassing and coming to it was a bombed airport, and finding the people there. And this was 9th Division. Wall was at the 9th Division. and then arranging for their movement out of the area. We did not keep them there.
Do you remember specifically any more than what?
No, I think we moved them either to Veldafink. You see, we were building up Veldafink at the time, or whether Landsberg.
This was a letter, file number 670 Evo, Sherita Plata, Germany. Okay. With regard to Veldafink, was there anything that you wanted to mention about how it became a Jewish camp?
Well, let's begin with Veldafink as a camp. When the army came through, and there were in the area a number of DPs of all nationalities. The unit turned to the mayor of one of the communities there. I think it was in Tutzing, and asked how these people could be accommodated. And after much discussion, the reference was made to the NSDAP camp, which was this school. It was actually a school for young Nazis. And eventually the people were brought into that camp, and Smith was then assigned by the unit to handle it. That's how it began. And according to Army orders, they were put in there, barbed wire, and the first few days the Red Cross was still operating, and they were charged with the responsibility of taking care and feeding them. And Veldafink was one of the areas that got most of the Red Cross attention, because the Red Cross headquarters was nearby, south of there. And this lasted a few days, and then orders came out that the camp was to be fed from German sources. And now the Germans were called in to supply the food. And thus the camp came into existence. That's where... Now, how did it become a Jewish camp? It became a Jewish camp when I stepped into the picture with a decision that there are to be Jewish camps. That's another rule that I established. Now, in this particular case, it seems that Smith also wanted to accomplish this. I'm not certain about this, but I'm under that impression.
Yeah, okay.
And so we had a common interest in this particular camp. The difference was that I wanted all camps to be Jewish, and his interest was only Veldafink. And only when Dachau was going to be closed, or had to be closed, and I was given the authority to move the people, and the deal that I made with the commanding officer, I then went to see Smith on this, and an agreement was reached. And then we also got an agreement with Richmond to move out the non-Jews. And so two things had to happen. The non-Jews had to be moved out, and the Jews had to be moved in. Now, it wasn't really a big problem to get Army to move out non-Jews, for the simple reason that in the camps that were established, where you had a collection of the various peoples, there was much tragedy taking place. People were turning against each other, and there were killings, and nationalisms began to manifest themselves. And it was recognized that it was a difficult situation. And so it didn't take much to convince the authorities that the camps would be better off if they were limited, at least, to the peoples that were in there. And furthermore, since the Jew was in a special class as having suffered the Holocaust, this wasn't a big problem. And having had Richmond on my side now, we were able to accomplish it with Veldafink, Landsberg, and so forth, and then thereafter we were able to set up the camps directly, like the Fehrenbau camp. I set up directly as a Jewish camp, and there was no problem there. So that's how the Veldafink came to be a Jewish camp.
The establishment of the other camps, should we deal with that as well, in terms of how they became Jewish camps?
Well, Landsberg operated the same way as Feldafink. We had Richmond move out the non-Jews, and we moved in the Jews. That's when I had a run-in with Cook Glasgow, when I told them we were moving people in.
We didn't go into that. What happened with him?
Well, when Cook Glasgow came in as the director, before that we had military directors. In fact, I have the names of them because I had dedicated also a volume to them. The dedications of these volumes served more than one purpose. First of all, it recognized what I thought was good work on the part of certain people. And secondly, it gave me a leg to stand on, because if anything, I always had to be aware of the fact that something might happen, and I have to fall back on something. And if I could show that here's a volume dedicated to 2 lieutenants of the United States Army for their good work, I already had the ear of Army. There was a fellow named Friedland, Arthur Friedland, and a fellow named Grant Stewart. They were in charge of Landsberg. And that was one of the problems at Landsberg with UNRWA, because they were in charge, not UNRWA. And if you had Army and then UNRWA, and then you had under them, you had JDC, you can see what the structural problems were. Well, anyway, here again we wanted a Jewish camp, and here we called in Richmond. And then we start to move Jews in. By this time, of course, we had Jews coming in from Poland.
This is 1946?
45 and 46, the end of 45 and 46. And we had to have a place for them. And Glasgow didn't want anybody else in his camp. He didn't have room for them, which was true. He had no room. But that wasn't our concern. We weren't concerned about room or not. We didn't have that luxury. And he insisted that, nobody was going to move anybody into my camp. Well, we moved him in anyway, and overnight he realized that he had a bigger population than he thought he had. But those 2 camps were made Jewish that way. And then from there on...
when was Landsberg became a Jewish camp?
It took time. It's over a period of time. In other words...
How many months are we talking?
First of all, the DP6 team is the one that did the moving, if I could recall the numbers. It took weeks and weeks. In other words, they would take the Poles and move them to a Polish center, and they would take others, and then the repatriation of people and so forth would be moved.
So this was at the end of May, at the end of 1945?
I would assume 45 going into 46. Now, Fehrenwald, this was a battle that I carried on with Army, and it was a battle because UNRWA interfered. I wanted a certain camp, and UNRWA set up the rules, and I had to fight UNRWA, and finally got it. And we set up a Jew, but that was set up immediately as a Jewish camp, and that was it. And these...
and that was when? Which year?
Well, that can be checked out because I have a report here on the camp in one of the volumes. Let's see, we can turn to volume 3. These are good for checking back on dates. Volume 3, which is now, this is August 1st, 45. I say the Camp Buchberg has been closed. Camp Fehrenwald now houses the former Buchberites. So by August 1st, I had already...
August 1st, 1945?
That's right.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Sounds a little early to me here, but this is, here's the material. I mean, it's printed, and I remember that whole scene quite vividly. See, in the next volume, we already have the listing of Fehrenwald, all the people in Fehrenwald. So those would be the dates.
Fine. Here's a letter that you wrote to Dr. Leon Kubovitsky, Kubovi. which brings up the whole question of your involvement with the World Jewish Congress, and I have more material on that.
Yes.
How is it that you were involved with the World Jewish Congress? What prompted you to write to them, in particular to Kubavi?
Well, the only answer I can give is that I got all kinds of inquiries and notes and letters from everybody. Unfortunately, I had no APO, so it had to be brought to me one way or another. I remember the B'nai B'rith representative coming to Germany, looking me up. There were constantly people coming, and, you know, talking my shoulder and something. I want this or that, give me this, give me that, and so forth. And I would respond in one way or another, and this must have happened. But if you were to ask me who Dr. Kubavisky is and what image I have of him, I'd be at a loss to recall.
Because I remember there were a number of letters between you and Dr. Kubavisky. He was involved with the rescue department of the World Jewish Congress.
Yes, I'm pretty sure there were people came, and you know, after a while, people were coming and going,
and also there's a letter in the other batch which we haven't looked at. Well, of course, from the later period when you said you would be more than happy to work with the World Jewish Congress.
Yes.
Which I'll show you later. Okay, so this is how you got in touch with the World Jewish Congress. Yes. Here's another document. I think I gave you a Xerox copy. Do you remember that particular incident, or is that...
Yes, I remember this quite well.
Could you...
Yes, I remember this fella, Horav, what's his name, the rabbi. I wasn't sure that he was always a rabbi. This was another black market case.
Oh.
And I would go to Garmisch quite often. See, they had already, Jews had settled in Garmisch, in the city, not in a camp. And they were having all kinds of problems. They were having problems with this fellow, the rabbi, who became the leader of the community. And whenever he had a problem, he would call me. And I remember going down in this particular case and getting them out of jail. One thing was certain, that if a German community was not pressured and didn't feel that there was somebody watching them, their treatment of the DPs was very bad.
And you were watching them?
That's right.
And they knew it?
And they knew it.
Here is a letter to the American Federation for Lithuania. Whenever you want to stop.
In a few moments I'll have to leave for a little while. And then Yes, now this medical instruments, finally we got them from New Haven. This created quite a problem with Joint because we did this.
What specifically took place? I think I should refer to, it's 675.
672.
672, excuse me. This is 19 March 46, a letter. Okay.
Since we wanted to establish our own hospitals, we also wanted to have them staffed with our own doctors.
Right.
And I felt that first of all, there are certain instruments that were necessary, which we couldn't get directly. And secondly, that if you gave a doctor his own instruments, basic instruments, it would give him a certain feeling that he was back in the medical world, instead of just being a DP. And so I checked around, and I found that there were certain instruments that the doctor should have. For example, here stethoscopes, for example. How can you be a doctor without a stethoscope? Manometers. You know, these, I didn't know what they were, except that they told me what would be the items, and so now I wanted to get them. I tried with JDC, but JDC always turned a deaf ear to any of my requests.
Really? Why?
I don't know.
You think it was, again, a conflict?
I think bureaucratic. You don't work this way. There's another chaplain. After all, who's this chaplain to JDC in New York?
Well, but they surely knew about you.
Yes, but don't forget, you're only in March.
Uh-huh.
You see. No, you're in March 46 already.
By that
time they should have known. No, I thought it was already. Well, again, this was, by this time perhaps they were upset by the fact that I was making the request. So I requested, wouldn't get him, so I turned to New Haven, and of course what happened was that when you turn to a community, the community says, why doesn't JDC provide them? And then of course you have their argument against my argument, and they try to defend themselves and so forth. Then the number C was very interesting, Matrice for linotype machine, because we want to set up the Yiddish newspaper. And we were trying to get the
But you didn't get that.
Oh, no, we had to have it made in Germany.
Yes,
I also wanted Yiddish typewriter, and I could never, they always upset me. Because when I kept insisting with Joint, send us a couple of Yiddish typewriters. And for some reason, always got reasons why you couldn't get them. War times, you know. There's such nonsense in terms of, it would have been the simplest thing for Joint to go somewhere in the United States and simply borrow or pick up a couple of Yiddish typewriters and send them. But they gave me all the reasons and never sent the Yiddish typewriter.
You know, there's a story that Jacob Trope tells.
Yes.
That when they went to Bergen-Belsen, that Rosensaft was so upset with them that he told them, either you give us the material or get us Yiddish typewriters so we can write to the world and let them know what Joint is not doing. So maybe perhaps they were concerned about what you could do with the Yiddish typewriter. Because it was a potent weapon.
Yeah. So this letter is simply a letter in which I write to them concerning these items. This was the end of the package program, because by that time we recognized that we were in trouble, and furthermore that could have been handled differently. It's very interesting that what I had really started was the CARE program. And
Right.
And had that the CARE concept been initiated earlier.
Yes, I noticed that right afterwards, the whole business of CARE.
That's right.
And that was, you think, an outgrowth of this?
I don't know, but basically that's what we did. Let me tell you before you, if they're involved, which is dated August 1st, was already established then, Feldefink and Landsberg were already Jewish camps by that time.
Do you want to wait, or do you want to?
No, go ahead.
Okay. This is from file 159, YIVO Institute, Sharita Plata, Germany. It's a letter from to Dr. Greenberg from I.L. Kennan, or Cy Kennan.
Yeah.
It reads in part on page 2, I have today acknowledged a letter from Chaplain Klausner, which I am acknowledging to him. We also received a cable from him suggesting that Judge Rifkin be succeeded. We took this matter up with Judge Rifkin, and he said that in the last analysis the question could be answered only in the light of what the inquiry committee would report. If the inquiry committee report is adverse, and he stated it was impossible that it should be adverse because of the consequences, then it would be absolutely necessary for someone to be there. I'm assuming he's talking about the Palestine Inquiry Commission.
That's right.
The Anglo...
That's right.
Was the Anglo...
I don't remember the technical
I forget,
name.
Yeah. In any event, were you suggesting in any way that Rifkin be succeeded, that he end his term, or was this just a...
No, we just want to make sure that
somebody else was...
that the office would continue. The inquiry committee can be either that, or it could also be the conference delegation committee. The conference sent a committee of 7 men.
Which, the American Jewish Conference?
Sent a committee of 7, we call them.
Mm-hmm. And who is that?
That consisted of a delegation from the American Jewish Committee, American Jewish Conference. I imagine it had Congress members on it. I don't know how the 7 was composed. It was here composed in the United States. But they had a committee that came over. I know Gray was on that committee. And Czar of the Yeshiva was on that committee. Those are 2 that I remember very well.
Mm-hmm. I've seen some of their reports on that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, while we're talking about the Special Office of Advisor for Jewish Affairs, perhaps we should go into it in a little more detail. Did you feel that it was an effective group of people working there? Did you work with them in any way?
Yes, actually, for me, the advisor served only one purpose. Having no status of any sort and no channels of command, my battles were always reckless in the sense that I struck wherever I could. Certain issues could not be handled on a local level, even on an army level. Status of the individual, identification, mobility. Therefore, there had to be some way of getting to the highest level of command. For me, that was the purpose of the advisor. We didn't need the advisor for anything else. In fact, he didn't help us on any other level. It was rarely that the advisor came to a local situation. Rifkin would come once in a while down to Munich when there was a major problem. One of the problems that came up, and which we discussed, was the establishment of Jewish entities. Also in that connection, was a question of camps or cities. Now, this would be a policy matter at this point. And so we felt that this had to be taken up by someone that could communicate with high command. So from that point of view, the advisor was important.
But only from that point.
That point of view. The advisor didn't serve any purpose. First of all, the advisor didn't get involved, let's say, in terms of the day-to-day living of the individual. We could, for example, if we felt that the calorie count, which I think was 2,200, allowable calorie count, was insufficient, we could fight on the local level. If we couldn't win on the local level and we had to have a major change in it, then we go to the advisor.
So that the advisors were helpful up to a point. Did you work with Rifkin, Leventhal? Did you work with?
I worked with all advisors.
All of them?
All of them. I met with all of them. I talked with all of them. They came to see me. I rarely went to see them. It was just a case of trying to get policy
They were
established.
effective.
I would assume so, because directives did come out from Army.
They were necessary.
Yes. The question of movement of people from East Europe to Germany, this was something we fought for, and we did it clandestinely. In other words, we went and we got them.
Mm-hmm.
But we realized this couldn't go on forever, that there had to be a policy. We knew that the United States Army was against it, and they were fighting the people, and there were a lot of tragedies on the borders. Up to the point that we could affect the situation, we did. But policy was much more important for us, and this policy could only come about through intervention. We couldn't do it.
So, you feel that they consulted you?
Oh yes, on every issue. I had, let's say, had input on every issue.
And you feel that they took your advice?
Every issue that we ever brought up was finally formalized in an order.
Did you find any particular advisor more effective than the next?
No. I found them all very pleasant.
They
Different
all-
personalities. First of all, I was a little closer to Bernstein because Bernstein was a rabbi. But Bernstein also crossed me on a number of issues in terms of my work.
For example?
When I wanted to come back.
Well, we'll get to that.
Yes.
Okay. Or unless you want to deal with that now.
No. Each man was interested in the matters we brought to their attention. There was no question about it. We never brought questionable items to them.
In other words, they were above that, or is that what you're telling me?
No, they were interested in carrying through what we had recommended.
But you said you never brought to them what type of issues?
Any issues of a debatable nature.
Why? For example, what would you be talking about?
In other words, when we brought the issue of repatriation, or status, or identification, or movement of people into the West. These are all matters they agreed to. They felt as we did. By the time we got to them, we had undergone tremendous experience. We had suffered through these problems. We didn't suddenly come and say, let's introduce this item in a camp, or let's get religious items for the religious people, or kosher food. These are the problems we solved on our level. We didn't go to them.
Mm-hmm.
Clothing, we didn't go to them. Housing, we didn't go to them. The establishment of camps for the people coming in. Or, for example, when they finally established the principle that people could come in from the East, you had to have camps. Well, the Army would never have opened those camps. I went to Kassel later, where we had maybe a dozen new camps established just for this purpose. This would have only happened if the order were given.
And they were in position to do that.
And they were the ones to effect it. We couldn't do that.
Could they have been more effective? Did they push hard enough?
This I couldn't say. All I could say is that the results were always good. In other words, we got everything we asked for.
So from your point of view...
I can't think of anything that, let's say, we fought for and brought to their attention which did not eventually become part of the official instruction.
Mm-hmm. Now, you were involved with the Stuttgart incident? The rioting?
Which was that?
I think this
I remember we had one riot there that I'm trying to recall. Well, here you have, first of all, this is the final result of the establishment of the Central Committee. It's recognition. We fought for this, and we fought for this through the advisors. The committee certainly wanted to be recognized, and eventually this was effected. And here you have the description
of how it came about.
of the ceremony that
Right.
that
Now,
took place. I wasn't there at the time.
you were in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Could you describe some of the difficulties that you had in getting recognition?
Well, actually, I had no difficulties because I was not able to address the question to the proper authorities. In other words, in order to get the committee recognized, officially it had to be done by the General of the Army.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that he had to have instruction from the diplomatic structure of government. There was no way for me to get to McNarney and to bring up the issue. The only thing that we could have done was to bring it to Bernstein's attention, and that we constantly did. This is one of the items.
Where he was...
That's right.
You felt that you were working with these advisors, that they,
Oh, yes, yeah.
that they were very sensitive to your concerns.
Definitely. They were not, they never posed any problems for us.
Okay.
For this, I'll be back in a second, but I don't know who Leona Weiss is. Certain things. Now, I must have received many, many letters, either directly or indirectly, from people in the United States. Once word got around that I was there, or other chaplains referred people to me. This first paragraph makes reference to the fact that prior to my coming to Germany, I had been invited to serve as the assistant to Rabbi Abba Silver.
That's what I thought.
And I never took the job, though, because the day I took the job, I entered the service. So this must have come from Cleveland. And this is a letter with reference to her cousin. With regard to your cousin, the camp at which he was recorded has been moved. He is known to be in the air. We shall trace him and inform him of your inquiry. So this was a letter of. In the meantime, for some reason, because of what she wrote to me, I had included a paragraph on description, which is my description of what was going on. And this was dated August 31st. And here you get a description. Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, that's kind of a description at that moment.
Here's the business with Stuttgart that I was mentioning before. I'm giving you the wrong one. I don't know who that letter was. It was obviously to Leo Schwartz.
Ruth and Leo. Stroll.
Oh, Stroll.
That's my guess.
Oh.
Leo Stroll. His wife's name is Ruth.
Uh-huh.
And this is Levy. Let me see now.
This is file number 165, Evo Institute.
Mm-hmm. The reference, I don't know what that is. I can understand what's happened here. If it's Leo maintained some interest in some of the things that were going on, and Levy was writing to him.
But Levy Becker?
Yes. That would be my assumption here. Levy. This reference is interesting here to this fountain pen.
Yeah.
Yes, well, there's part truth to it. When the first issue of Unser Weg appeared, we had a big celebration at St. Etienne. And Levy, Charlatan was his original name, had accomplished this. And it was quite an accomplishment. And the newspaper started very simply, and I remember it very clearly. I drove into Feldefing. Charlatan was in Feldefing. And I had a car that I'd picked up someplace and had a big plaque on it. Somebody made in Dachau, a Ten Commandments plaque stuck on the front. And when I'd come into the camp, the people would crowd around. Levy was a very tall fellow. I didn't know who he was. And he looked over the heads of everybody and he shouted at me. He said, listen, we need a newspaper. You know, it was a rather strange sight, you know. And I looked back at him and I said, you'll have a newspaper. And then we started.
You would remember when that took place.
Well, it was very early. You take the date of the first issue and just work back. You know, you only have a short period in there. And then, of course, he held me to my word. And so now we had to have things. We had to have paper, we had to have type, and we had to have a press. And permission to print. 3 things we needed. So paper was no problem. My connections in Dachau were such that I could get paper. There was a paper mill in Dachau. And there was
in the city of Dachau.
Yes, the paper. And I had an authorization from one of the officers there to draw paper. As far as authority is concerned, I figured I would authorize it. So if you look at Unser Weg, you'll see my name appears. That my name is there for authorization. In case anybody asks, why is this paper being printed? Now, type. This became a big problem. And so Shalit worked on it, and he came to me, and he said he knew where to go and get it, and so I promoted his trip, in other words, provided him all transportation, everything, and he went up to Frankfurt. And he eventually found a matrice, as they call it, or a simple set of type. I don't know the technicalities. and he brought it back. And then we went around looking for a printer. And we found a printer, and we had to pay the printer, you know, coffee, cigarettes, and so forth. In other words, we had to set up a system by which we'd have the paper and the printing and all this. And the paper was in business. I think it was one of the finest accomplishments in terms of a person setting himself to a task under the most adverse circumstances. And then the paper was published. So we celebrated the first issue. The first issue was printed in blue. And there were a number of copies which numbered. They were numbered in the center of the first page, number 1, 2, 3, 4. And these were designated, one for Stalin, one for Roosevelt, for Truman, one for Churchill, and so forth. They were all sent except the one to Stalin. We never sent that one. So we celebrated. And during the celebration, as a gesture at that point, there was no way I could express myself. I had a fountain pen with a gold top on it. So in acknowledging the accomplishment, I pulled out the fountain pen and I said, it was a set, pen and pencil, and I says to Levy, here, take your notes with my pen. And so I made the presentation. But that was the whole story of the pen. I didn't go around with I didn't have any other pens to distribute.
Okay,